have 3 jobs: raising the children, going to work in a Walmart top job, and then going for a part-time job cleaning some office building, and still not able to make it. Some liberation. We have people in this country who work and they are pushed around, disrespected, ignored, underpaid, denied health care, having their children mistreated, excluded. And yet, without them, the country would come to a standstill. People say to us, Nader Camejo ticket, you're an underdog candidacy. Sure, we're the underdog candidacy. And we give voice and speak to those tens of millions of American underdogs who are pushed around and ignored and underpaid and denied health care. Then they say to us, well, you're not doing that well in the polls. It's as if anybody, unless they're Ross Perot and can buy all kinds of TV time, who can do that well in the polls when the major parties have rigged the system from ballot access barriers to exclusion from the debates in ways that make a straitjacket look loose by comparison? One cannot begin to chronicle the way the system is rigged. It's rigged even when the polls, Zogby, 57%, Fox, 58%, wanted me on those presidential debates, a majority of the people. But it didn't matter because the Commission on Presidential Debates was created as a private corporation and is controlled by the 2 parties. And imagine, you can campaign over 50 states, as I have, from Hawaii to Maine and Alaska to Florida. Campaign before significant audiences and not exceed 2% of reaching the people compared to being on one of those presidential debates. So basically we have a system that is a 2-party electoral dictatorship carving up the country into one-party monopoly districts. They're leaving the American people with one party in 95% of the House of Representative districts. It's called the incumbent party. The other opposing party is either not fielding a candidate or is not just fielding a nominal candidate. Just think of this. 435 members of the House ran for election in 2002. Only 4 lost. And one of them was Gary Condon. That's what you have to do to lose. 4, that's the lowest in American history. And if the Democrats control a state, they carve it up so they control a monopoly position. The Republicans control a state and they carve it up. And now they're only about 5 to 8% of the House seats that are competitive. They don't even fight anymore over the rest of the seats. Now you know what that means? Let's draw the conclusion. There is no election when there's no selection. An election has to have at least 2 choices, however fictional they may be. Right? This isn't an election. On November 2, it's a coronation of the incumbent. That's the end of democracy. There's no democracy here. You see, the controlling processes of the American plutocracy and oligarchy and their political minions has never been more sophisticated, never been more subtle, never been more insistently successful, while retaining the symbols of a democracy, the symbols of free election, the symbols of access as a candidate. It's over in most districts. 60% of the legislators in Massachusetts running for re-election on Tuesday, tomorrow, have no opponent on the line. It's just automatic. Nationwide, it's 40%. What does that do to our metabolism? Here's the problem we have. This is a generation, whatever the cause. It could be television from age 2, spending so much time watching screens, and now they're internet screens, and there's screens in the elementary school called computer literacy screens. I'd settle for literacy. There are 30, 40, 50 hours we're looking at, these kids are looking at screens. This is a generation that's numb to injustice. Numb. The poor are not being heard from. They feel totally powerless, resigned to their fate, trying to eke out a crumb here and a crumb there. And we're talking 40% of the households in our country are really poor. You can't have four members of a family making anything less than $40,000 a year before income tax and before payroll deductions who isn't poor. And what's going on here is that the great challenge in our country is how do you get people civically and politically motivated to break their routine, to spend a few hours a week on their choice form of injustice, to connect with others from the neighborhood to the community, to the city, to the state, to the nation, to the world. Is there anything more gratifying than the pursuit of justice? Can there really be pursuit of happiness if it isn't preceded by the pursuit of justice? And the pursuit of justice itself is a form of the pursuit of happiness. But then, what is our breaking point? It's often said, what do you mean there's no difference between the two parties? Well, of course there are differences. But on the corporate power issues, on our elections and government and politicians being sold and controlled by corporations, on the issues of corporate globalization and corporate crime and corporate welfare and the tax system, there aren't that many differences, especially since the Democrats, even when they are different, are not willing to fight and stop, even though they'll say they don't like the tax cut for the wealthy. So you might ask your frightened liberals the following question when they say the following: anybody but Bush, leave Kerry alone, make no demands on him. Make no demands on him because anybody but Bush. Now what that happens is that all these groups that you send $25 or $30 to in the mail, the civil liberties groups, the affordable housing groups, the minority groups, the anti-poverty groups, the environmental groups, the consumer groups, the anti-war group, none of them are making demands. None of them are making demands. We have checked 20 of their sites, and they're all for Kerry, and they're not pulling Kerry in their direction, presumably a direction that would get Kerry more votes, presumably a direction that would make Kerry better, presumably an attempt to at least counter the 24 hours a day pull on Kerry and the Democrats by the corporate interests. And so these liberals, I think, are in complicity by making Kerry worse, their favorite. They are making him weaker and less likely to get the votes that he could get. It's pretty amazing when you see all these groups fighting for a better country and they somehow think that their issues are not vote-getting issues. This is not possible. What kind of self-respect do they have? Of course they're vote-getting issues, especially if you blaze the trail for the Democratic Party to move into the mass of the people for whom the two parties mean nothing. That's why most of them don't bother voting. It doesn't mean anything for them. And so ask these people, what's your breaking point? A lot of silence on that one. At what point would your party, your least worst party, go before you broke with it?